Welcome to the next edition of Grid Forward Forum. I am Bryce Yonker with Grid Forward. Today we have with us a wonderful guest, Nick Russell, coming from an organization called Watch Duty. Nick, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the group? Who are you? What are you working on? What do you do over there?
Yeah, so my name's Nick Russell. I'm the Vice President of Operations here at Watch Duty. I actually spent the last 10 years of my life managing the largest organic dairy farm in Northern California. So for me, wildfires were a big part of my past. Obviously concerned about livestock. We need to keep on the up and up of what was going on, and we have tremendous relationships as a large agricultural user with our utilities. So spent a lot of years coordinating on both ends of that, from wildfire response to working with our utilities for different facets of the agricultural operation. So my last year there, I volunteered simultaneously at Watch Duty. I started as a contributor, how everybody starts here, and then I became a reporter, and then joined the team full time about a year and a half ago now, taking over operations. And it's really been a fun journey. I developed our Echo radio devices that are now deployed throughout several Western states and increase our situational awareness with tone out detections of fire responses, as well as live streaming audio from the fire ground.
Great. So wildfires have come to majorly impact most states in the Western U.S. and many places beyond that in the last handful of years. Can you briefly give us a bit of the history with Watch Duty and what you all are looking to accomplish now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Watch Duty began back in August of 2021 when our co-founder and CEO, John Clark Mills, moved to a rural area in northern Sonoma County where we're both located. And so completely off the grid where he was, definitely had cell service, but after the first few months of moving in, he started noticing aircraft flying over with buckets, dropping water on smoky areas, and it was a new thing for him. And so he was trying to look around more and was finding very little information about what was happening. And as time went on, he started discovering local groups who are getting this information in a crowdsourced fashion. Through those groups to the community. And so he's like, well, this is pretty neat. Okay. Now I'm starting to learn more about the neighborhood, so to speak. But then fast forward to August of 2020, he was forced out of his newly acquired ranch due to the Wallbridge fire, which was up here in Sonoma County. And so when he got to a safe area, he starts looking, where's the fire at? Where did it start? Where do they see the danger going? What are the impacts to critical infrastructure? Where do I go for resources? And he found the information, but it was as a result of going to many different locations and trying to aggregate a story together based off of what was being said. But then when he turned back to those local groups, they had every piece that he was looking for and allowed him to feel a sense of calm, staying up all night long trying to track the fire out where it was. And so as the dust settled, he thought, wow, there's got to be a better way to get this information all in one place. And so he set out to learn more about wildland response and suppression. And in August of 21, the app was born and served the original three counties, Sonoma Lake and Napa County. And we quickly realized that it wasn't just community members that were in John's position. It was mutual aid resources coming from out of the area, utilities coming from out of the area to assist, other utilities in large outages or emergent situations. And they all had fragmented information because there wasn't a centralized place to get it. And so, John said, wow, we got to figure out how we can help more people. And so, Watch Duty eventually expanded to the entire state of California and then 11 additional states the following year. And now we're in 22 states and 1,476 counties. And the mission really is to aggregate all the information on disasters as a whole, starting with wildfire, to get people to actionable information they need to make decisions.
Yep. I downloaded it some time ago, drove away from a frightening fire in September of 2020 in the Santiam Canyon in Oregon. And it really is an amazing app. So preparing for wildfires is something that falls on really everyone that's in these high risk areas. So you mentioned first responders and emergency management. You already mentioned utilities, but I mean, really it goes all the way down to businesses and individuals themselves. How do you see the overall collaboration happening? What does that look like so that you can be ready for these massive events like a major wildfire?
Well, I think that the challenging situation right now is what we see with each new emergent large wildfire is things that we've never seen before, right? Whether it's tremendous wind-driven growth or consuming large populous areas, and so I think seeing is believing. And so a lot of people are seeing what's happening and the devastation in these areas, which motivates them to take action at a granular level, right? Because you're right, it's all stakeholders. I just mentioned a few of those stakeholders, but it could be local businesses, it could be agricultural operations like I was a part of. These are all people who need that actionable information. And so getting that all into one place is crucial, and getting the message of what could happen and preparing accordingly is how the difference is made. I don't think we're going to stop wildfire ignitions overnight or even in the next 5 years, but what we can do is work together as communities, as stakeholders in varying capacities, and increase defensible space. It's not always about these huge, tremendous financial undertakings. Sometimes it's the small elbow grease efforts at a neighbor by neighbor in a neighborhood that makes the difference. Getting that defensible space behind the home, defensible space and utility and right of ways, and the list goes on in businesses and fire prone areas, especially as the high risk areas seem to increase in density year over year throughout many Western states. And, that continues the eastward trend as well. And so complacency is really the place you don't want to be, and awareness is where you want to be. Even if it's in LA and you're in Oregon, you should take those as lessons and see how can I augment what I'm doing today to prevent devastating spread in my area when a new ignition starts, not if.
So maybe we can dive a little bit deeper on our utility audience, because you all interface with individuals directly, emergency management, fire agencies, really a lot of folks that need to do something with an alert on a pending wildfire threat. How does the role of the electric grid operator, the utilities, come into this overall ecosystem as you all are figuring out them as a part of the community response to a pending wildfire?
I think it's very much bi-directional between grid operators at distribution transmission levels and watch duty situational awareness tools that we have built, because there's the precursor to a potential event, whether that's PSPS or red flag conditions, fire weather warnings. And so we're watching that, right? We want to understand where are potential areas for PSPS. We very much appreciate them because we've seen the results of damaged equipment in a PSPS area, and no new ignitions took place. But when the power is de-energized, we want to make sure that we're hyper aware, because there's instances where folks don't take opportunities to charge devices, or that can become more challenging. So we want to be cognizant of that internally. But then as far as the situational awareness platform, I spend time visiting control centers and utilities in varying capacities and hazard awareness centers. And you see watch duty there because we're telling that contextual story from the start of ignition until the threat passes or the last engine leaves. And we're doing it in a unique way by telling a storyline of events, much like sports reporting. So the fire is now 5 acres. It's, past this road, and critical infrastructure could be impacted the next 20 minutes, right? So even if they are listening to radio traffic in these control centers, many times that's not feasible for operators, but they can see the contextual reports that are on many large displays in these centers and make decisions to de-energize before they receive those calls from first responders asking for that to happen, as power comes close to infrastructure. But it also allows them to dispatch crews to manually de-energize equipment ahead of those asks. So what we see is, I don't want to pull the public into your question and conflate this, but it kind of goes hand in hand. We see folks leaving evacuation areas before they become evacuation areas, before that discussion's had. And then we see crews getting dispatched ahead of those warnings as well, because it's cheap to have somebody turn around, but it's really expensive to be 20 minutes late, right? And I say that metaphorically, but it's really those extra seconds to get that head start, regardless of who you are.
And just a little bit into the kind of mechanics of, are the operators getting a different interface than customers are, or is everybody kind of seeing the same information at the same time as they interact with the app and what you guys are delivering to them?
I think the information that everybody is getting is the same. It's where they look at it at, right? Because, anybody can go to app.watchduty.org online and see the same thing they see on their phone, or they can download it on whatever the mobile platform is. But there are a lot of proprietary tools being used at utilities that interface a lot of functions that we don't have in WatchDuty, right? So we do display that inside proprietary tools. But what we've understood over time is that works really well in control centers. But when you start to get out in the field, that becomes a bit more challenging. So one of the big things that we're excited about launching here shortly is Watch Duty Teams, which will allow utilities to import those GIS layers and those other assets into the Watch Duty map and have what I like to refer to as a common operating platform for situational awareness.
So let's maybe dive in a bit into the solution there and the solutions kind of writ large in the ecosystem. I like to say AI seems to be coming for us all. I don't know if that's a good thing or a scary thing. I've seen a number of capabilities for advanced monitoring, image recognition, advanced forecasting, and some others that seem to show some real promise with regard to dealing with wildfire. How do you all see this evolving? Is there some advanced capabilities leveraging data, machine learning outcomes that you think are exciting and are going to take us to another level of capability?
Yeah, I think AI has a mixed bag of offerings. Some of them positive, some of them introducing new challenges that we are aware and are not aware of yet. I think the most powerful thing I've seen in the utility stakeholder space, first responders, is camera networks, right? Because you take California for an example, 1,297 cameras on mountaintops and valleys throughout the state with a very high percentage of coverage. And so those cameras are available, through Alert California, Alert West outside of the state of California. And that network is building constantly. And that allows for real-time situational awareness. But when you start thinking about 1,297 cameras in California, 8,000 plus cameras in the United States, all under the same umbrella of Alert West, how how do you look at that many things? And that's where AI comes in. But there's diligence, right? Because AI has come a tremendous stride in the last handful of years, but are we ready to trust it with emergency response 100% yet? Probably not, right? It requires human validation. And I think that people in the space who have added that into their workflow, and again, I don't want to keep bringing up Alert West, but they are really the example of this because they have, thousands of cameras out there that are all feeding alerts back to a human run center that then validates that and issues an alert to a utility for a fire that's inside of an area of interest, to first responders through the PSAPs to get a response and route to these things. And, last year in California, that beat 911 calls 31% of the time. And early suppression leads to the less chances of a large devastating wildfire. So that's an excellent example of AI. But then we've seen AI in other space that's consolidating notes down from internal systems, and there could be some missing context there, right? And that can be very dangerous at times. So I think AI has come a long way. Humans still have a very relevant place in validation of that AI. But I've seen some fantastic stuff from companies like Gridware, who are monitoring lines for line slap and precursors to other events that could lead to failure, especially in high fire risk areas. So I think there's a lot of great AI solutions out there, but when you look out of them, a lot of them have human validation involved in that, or metrics that can be, validated internally.
Right? You've mentioned the word situational awareness a couple times. So, what does that mean to you, and how do we get better at it with regards to what's going on around wildfire risk?
Yeah, situational awareness is a toolbox that seems to get heavier and heavier. It used to be with each year. Now it's really with each month. There's another tool coming out, another tool, and so that's really been a point of focus for us. Is as more tools come out, we want to continue to aggregate those, whether we're using them on the back end or we're showing them to our users. They're all great tools in different respects, and they all have positive and wins in different regional, geographic areas, as well as different fields that they operate in. And so I think there's a ton happening all at once. There's a lot of duplicative efforts. There's a lot of neat efforts happening from the new constellations and low Earth orbit satellites to monitor detections. But situational awareness comes with openness. Because when we have all these efforts happening and there's silos that require a username and password to get into or approval, it becomes challenging to share across stakeholders, regardless of who they are. And so our mission is to keep things open and free. We do, of course, have some paid levels that support keeping the app free. But the people that we make strategic partnerships with are those of the same mindset. Those who have websites that you can go on and see all of the infrastructure they've deployed, and that can be shared across stakeholders. And I think that's really important. When we think about situational awareness, it means aggregation and that means openness. Otherwise, it kind of becomes something different.
Can you talk a little bit about how you all procure the information that you get and what you do with the information that you get? How the users end up benefiting from an alert that they might get or some sort of a status that's something that they need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, so our process starts in Slack. We use Slack as an internal messaging system. We've divided each one of the states that we operate in regionally. And then we have authoritative data sources as well as our third party partnership data sources all streaming into those channels. And we refer to them as signals, right? Everything is a signal of a potential new event, regardless of what that might be: wildfire, flood, weather event. And then it's up to our team of 200 plus volunteers, 15 paid staff to then go validate those signals, generally using radio traffic, because what we've learned over time is radio traffic is where the real information is. And you hear those reports from the fire ground. The fire's 5 acres with a rapid rate of spread. Those are the things that we want to extract out of there and take as, I might not know where Mary Lane is and, Cypress Street, right? But the person in that local area, regardless of who they are, a resident, someone who operates, that's their territory, they know those streets. So those become action trigger words for them. They're like, okay, I know where that is. I know where the fire is. I'm seeing the wind. I'm seeing everything come together. And they can start taking action before there's an official a lawful order to evacuate or a warning, whatever it might be. And so our team is constantly receiving these signals, validating them, and then we always start everything as what we call silent. So we just want to get it on our map. That way, if somebody's seeing the smoke, they can start getting that information. But if we start to see a threat to life, property, infrastructure, or this is something that can be seen and is going to potentially inundate a 911 center with calls of curious folks, then we'll upgrade that incident and we send an alert out at a county level to all those subscribed. You see the flame pop up on the map in its full form as opposed to the stricken bell. And that's when that storyline of reports starts. And so, people take action in different ways from every single one of those reports. They're meaningless to 5 people, but it means everything to 20 more, right? Everybody's emergency is different.
Costly distribution upgrades, frequent extreme weather events, demand surging from an onslaught of distributed energy resources adoption. Do these challenges sound familiar? If so, you need Virtual Peaker's cloud-based distributed energy platform. We're empowering modern utilities with next-generation virtual power plant solutions to maximize the value of DERs. The Virtual Peaker platform unifies all aspects of DER management, from DERMS to customer engagement and demand forecasting. Learn more at virtual-peaker.com.
Maybe taking a step up or back, we talked a little bit about being prepared and ready to deal with wildfire. So, as individuals and businesses and government and utilities, each try to put one foot in front of the other. How can the wider community be better ready? Be better ready for the impact, be better ready to respond. And then maybe a similar question, if the threat's high all the time, how do you maintain that level of readiness without, some kind of fatigue? If it's now really is time to act.
That's a great point. And I think for some, Watch Duty has become some of that relief, some of that, stress lowering. Because for me here in Sonoma County, the fires really became more prevalent in 2017 with the Tubbs fire and the other fires that were in the area here. And I think one of the challenging things is complacency sets in as soon as the smoke stops, right? And so it becomes difficult to look back and say, what could we have done different? What could we have done better? And you can always dig back and find those things, but the path forward is about creating plans. So you talk about resident level, business level. It doesn't matter what it is. You need speaking of businesses, right, you need to look at that emergency action plan that most businesses have to talk about natural disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, and really assess the risk of what wildfire looks like and what does that plan and response look like for your organization. Me as an agricultural organization, we had assignments through different departments when a wildfire was encroaching on any of the areas that we managed. We had steps to do, gas shutoffs, all kinds of different things. So knowing those areas, exercising those things is good. And then taking the same thing back to residences as well is exercising those plans, creating the plans. And when you get into what we'll call fire season, if you ever get out of it to re-enter it, it's important to move yourself into a ready status, right? Like there's different evacuation terms in each state, ready, set, go, evacuation, order, warning. But ready, set, go is a general concept of wildfire preparedness and preparedness as a whole. And so for me, I go into ready state in June, and I generally stay there until it's rained about 8 inches. So for me, it's usually December.
And as we mitigate the risk of various disturbances, I'm very intrigued by, investing once and having benefit to multiple extreme activities. Some are rather unique, right? The impact of seismic or something like that is very different than wind or fire. But is there areas where you're seeing, lessons in from certain risks or certain events can kind of bleed over into helping, more general preparedness and response be effective?
I think it's really just the occurrence of different hazards and the frequency of those increasing throughout at least our coverage area and my areas of interest, right? The increase in all kinds of different hazards. And so what that tells me is like, let's keep going back and reassessing our plans in response to these hazards. And, maybe we didn't think about tornadoes before in California, but over the last couple of years, we've had a couple. Maybe let's just consider what if, and have that plan in place. Maybe I didn't worry about wildfires before because I'm in the state of Iowa and it wasn't something that was that big 10 years ago. But, today we have multiple active fires in Iowa, and, locals are saying, wow, this is a different thing that we're dealing with. So I think it's always remaining in that state of ready. If you're not always prepared, you're never prepared. So it's going and taking those lessons that are occurring in areas around you and localizing those to yourself.
I know it can be a difficult process to think about and talk about, but when impacts are especially extreme, like LA, or pick any other examples you might want to think about, what are we learning from these? What can we take away from these really big and high impact events and disasters that helps us into the future? Any ideas come to mind? It can be from last month or really any other kind of major event that you guys have worked your way through.
I think it's just working together is essential, right? Fires don't care about county lines. They don't care about state lines. They don't care about response areas. So it's coming together at varying levels of stakeholders to work together in the response to these events as they unfold, the precursors to them. And I already think people do a fantastic job post-disaster. We see the true colors really shine in all communities in the wake of these events, which, is unfortunate, but it's certainly heartwarming to see. So, getting together and at a county level, right? Coming together and saying, we're all going to do our evacuations together. We're all going to do it this way. We're going to come together as a cooperative of sorts and attack this at a broader level with a larger voice and with shared cost, right? And the same thing can happen through different stakeholders, and whether it's fire-wise communities at a neighborhood level or it's utilities developing cooperatives to work together for better communications to the public about events that are going to happen, new plans or possible discussions or ways to support efforts or get support from these different organizations. So I think that is definitely paramount in being successful in the future is togetherness, not just post event, but pre and during.
Yeah, I like to say if we've got extreme risk, we've got to have extreme collaboration to be able to address it. All right, last question. Let's say we're in the future 2 or 3, to your point, who knows when wildfire season really is, but 2 or 3 or 5 wildfire seasons from now, how do you look back and think about some measure of success that's happened, maybe in the realm that you guys are, more directly able to impact, or even more broadly, if you want to talk about it that way?
Yeah, to me, future, looking into the future and fire seasons and just seasons as a whole, we'd like to expand just outside of wildfire as a hazard, because there's more hazards that come after wildfires, mudslides, other weather events. So learning from all these things and seeing where the challenges are, especially when we get these late season fires that have rain right behind them, how do we increase our coverage and communications on the hazards ahead of these events? Like, there is a potential for debris flow because of X, Y, and Z. Here's the hazard areas. It's looking back at these fire seasons, taking lessons and alerting more people, getting more people in the know to understand what to do when these events occur. Because the really challenging thing that we see is folks don't familiarize themselves with their local evacuation zones. They don't familiarize themselves with egress routes until it's time to get in the car and go. Right. And so the more education and awareness that we can raise around that, and again, it's pre, post, and during the fire education, I think that's where we'd really like to have a big impact. That's where we want to have a disaster wiki where people can go and get this information and help develop these plans at varying different levels. Because I think we all realize that the ignitions are not going to decrease in frequency. There's certainly going to be fluctuations as weather patterns change, wet winters, dry winters, so on and so forth. But we all need to be prepared to leave in a safe manner early enough to do so and not be stuck on roads. And so the more education we can do by learning from what's happened in the past, there's a more positive outcome for everybody that's likely less disastrous, and less lives are lost. Structures, of course, we hope that the mitigation efforts can continue in building materials and other things to make them more fire resistant, but lives are paramount, right?
Well, Nick Russell, thanks for being on with us. Since you won't do it, I will provide a shameless plug. If you don't have Watch Duty, go get it. Obviously, you need to be in a state that they're active in. I've been the recipient of the alerts. They are very informative. Plug in the counties that you have your own property or friends and family, and stay informed. Thank you guys for all you're doing, and thanks for being on the podcast with us.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having us, and it's an honor to serve. We'll continue to do it.
Thanks again to our season sponsor, Virtual Peaker. If you enjoy Grid Forward Chats, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a like or a review, and tell your colleagues. You can listen to all episodes and learn more about our efforts to advance the grid at gridforward.org.